is now my honor to introduce Carol Browner, Administrator of the EPA, who took office along with President Clinton in January 1993. She is, in a very real sense, our ultimate protector. That is, the federal steward of our country's air, soil, and water. Her priority is preventing pollution, not waiting to clean it up. And I would say, as an aside, that's a priority which other administrators in other settings might be well advised to adopt. Ms. Browner is working to reinvent environmental protection to achieve the very best public health in this arena for the least cost. 2 years ago, she announced what she called the Common Sense Initiative, a new industry by industry approach to environmental regulation rather than taking up the issues of air, water, and land separately and sequentially. She's taken voluntary simplicity to heart in dealing with the regulatory maze of environmental regulation. And Browner ended decades of water wars by negotiating water quality standards for San Francisco Bay. She established broad protection for the Great Lakes. She took enforcement action against a record number of polluters while also offering a new level of compliance assistance to businesses. At the same time, she's expanding requirements for industry to inform the public of their toxic emissions. Under her direction, EPA has also played a key international role in negotiating the environmental side agreement to NAFTA, and EPA has also worked to develop this administration's Climate Change Action Plan to slow global warming and the administration's proposal to ban the overseas export of hazardous wastes. Carol Browner hails from South Carolina, which is Everglades country. I'm sorry, South Florida. I was thinking about the hurricane. South Florida, which is Everglades country. An environment which she personally worked to clean up as chief of that state's agency for environmental protection in the 2 years preceding her move to Washington, D.C. An alum of the University of Florida and its law school, she served as general counsel for the Florida House of Representatives Government Operations Committee in 1980. And then from 1986 to 1988, Browner worked for then Senator Lawton Chiles, who of course is now the governor of Florida. And after that, she switched to another senator, anybody guess? Al Gore Jr. And like Mr. Gore, Browner sounds the theme of compatible greens, green earth and green bucks, when the two take account of each other in forming the inheritance for future generations. I give you Carol Browner.
Thank you, Chris, for that wonderful introduction, and thank all of you for the opportunity to be here. It is a great city that you have, and I will tell you, I have spoke at many city clubs across the country. This is the first one where I've actually seen the debate of the debate of a serious issue, and congratulations to you for taking the time to think about how you can do something for your community, how you can focus on an issue of concern to your community. I come here today to speak to you at a very important time. It is a time at which we have been engaged in this country in what I think is probably the most important environmental debate in the last 2.5 decades. It was only 26 years ago that this nation joined together, citizens, business, government, Democrats, Republicans, in a bipartisan commitment to protect our health, the air we breathe, the water, the land we share. It was 26 years ago that Richard Nixon created the United States Environmental Protection Agency. I think it is fair to say that in those 26 years, a relatively short period of time, we have, by working together, made a tremendous amount of progress. 3.5 years ago, when President Clinton and I came to Washington, we called on the businesses of this country, the communities, all levels of government, federal, state, local, to help us continue that progress, to create what we call a new generation of environmental protection, one that recognizes the strength, the successes of the past, one that will allow us to meet the challenges of the future. A new generation of environmental protection that is about protecting the health of our families, our communities, and our economy. It is about providing real benefits for real people: fresh air to breathe, clean water to drink, safe food to eat, land that we are not afraid to live on. A new generation is about reinventing the process, the system of regulations, so that we can provide better protection for less money. With the leadership of President Clinton, this administration initiated a series of common sense actions to change our system of environmental regulation, to move beyond mere regulation, to achieve true protection of the American people and the world we live in. Today, because of those actions, real people in real communities across the country are reaping everyday benefits. We have achieved in the last 3.5 years the single largest reduction in toxic air pollution in the history of the United States. Literally tens of millions of Americans now breathe cleaner air, air that meets public health standards. We've set the first ever standards for toxic hazardous waste disposal, incineration. We've taken aggressive actions to keep contamination out of our waters. Since this administration took office, we have provided this state with $72 million in loan funds to help local communities keep raw sewage out of your rivers and lakes. We've provided money to work in areas of critical importance to you, the estuaries of the Columbia River, more than $3 million to address those concerns. Nationally, this administration has cleaned up more toxic dump sites in 3 years than in the first 12 years of the Superfund program, allowing thousands of children the right to play in their neighborhood free of toxics, something that we believe every child should have a right to do. Here in Portland earlier today, I had the opportunity to meet with a group of your fellow citizens working to address the issue of brownfields, the properties along the waterfront in Northeast Portland that have long lain contaminated, abandoned, taking hope out of the community. We work together in communities like Portland, communities across the country, to see hope restored, to see the sites cleaned up. In Portland, we've awarded the city a $200,000 grant to help bring together the citizens, developers, lenders, builders, to encourage the redevelopment, the revitalization, the new jobs, the new hope, so that the places that were once a blight on the community can once again become thriving and productive centers of business and community life. We are doing this in cities across the country, helping cities begin the process of cleaning up and redeveloping their brownfields, and at the same time saving the pristine and open spaces outside of our cities. What I saw today, this morning in Portland, is one of the best efforts. What I saw is people working together, taking each other seriously, taking the time to understand each other's concerns, working to identify the properties most in need of revitalization, to figure out what it will take to see those properties revitalized, to give the community a voice in deciding what will happen after the cleanup, whether the land will be developed as an industrial site, a park, a grocery store. People coming together, seizing the opportunity taking the responsibility, building a better community. Last month, this country took a major step into the future when the President signed two very important new environmental laws. The new food safety law signed by President Clinton embodies the principles of food safety reform that the President proposed 3 years ago. It replaces a law that was more than 35 years old. It replaces a fragmented system with a single, more protective, comprehensive, health-based standard for all pesticides, all chemicals on our food. No longer does the law limit our ability to reject dangerous pesticides solely because of cancer risks. Now we can reject a pesticide because of birth defects, reproductive problems, impacts on the immune system, and cancer. All health risks, all pesticides, all foods. The new law also gives the consumer, each and every one of you, a right to know about pesticides on the food you eat. And perhaps most important to me as the mother of a young child, we got in the law a requirement that every time we make a decision at EPA about the use of a chemical on our food, that we must make a scientific finding that our children's health will not be affected. It's very simple under this law. If a pesticide poses a danger to our children, it won't be in our food. We know that if we protect our children, the most vulnerable among us, we are protecting all of us. The President also signed a new Safe Drinking Water Act. It embodies principles put forward by the President and this administration 3 years ago. There was a time in this country when we could take for granted the safety of our drinking water. Unfortunately, we cannot continue to take for granted the safety of our drinking water. We need to bring to bear the science, the tools, and dollars so that once again we can guarantee that every time we turn on our tap, the water is clean, that every glass we fill with water is safe to drink. The new law signed by the President strengthens the standards that protect the public from the most significant threats to safe drinking water. Cryptosporidium, which killed more than 100 people in Milwaukee. Microbial contaminants. The new law sets high standards that take into account the needs, again, of our most vulnerable, our children, those who are ill. It also gives the American people the right to know about contaminants in your tap water. Direct, simple information that will be sent to your home every year as part of your water bill, giving you information about local water quality, contaminants, where your tap water comes from. What's the river? What's the lake? What's the aquifer that your tap water comes from? And whether any of the contaminants found pose a health risk. Included in this new law is something the President fought for 3 years ago, and that is the first ever pot of federal dollars to local communities to upgrade drinking water systems. Under this new law, nearly $10 billion in loan funds will go straight to the states to be provided at a low interest rate loan to local communities to upgrade their water treatment systems. Under this law, Oregon will be available in just the first year of the program for up to $10 million. New federal dollars to help you upgrade your drinking water systems to provide each and every one of you with safe, clean water to drink. The law also provides for those communities who want to take the common sense approach of preventing the pollution the ability to do that. It sets forth a common sense framework for protecting the sources of our drinking water, the river, the lake, the streams, the aquifer. We have sort of a silly system in this country. We let the pollution go in and then we worry about getting it back out before we drink it. For the first time ever now in federal law is the ability to protect the source water, the river, the lake that becomes the tap water. We believe that protecting our drinking water supplies, guaranteeing the people of this country clean, safe water to drink is the first line of defense for public health. From the day that the president took office, he has worked hard to meet a fundamental promise to the American people, that they should know that the food they eat, the water they drink, will not make them sick. Today, those principles are the law of the land. We've also recognized right from the start that when we trust honest business people as partners in this effort to protect our health, to protect our environment, not as adversaries, but as partners, that we make more progress. And so under the president's leadership, we have challenged businesses across the country to find creative, new ways to exceed existing pollution standards. Last November, the president announced a cutting-edge program called Project XL, Excellence in Leadership. Working in partnership, business, cities, states, environmentalists, and community activists are designing new ways, not just to meet environmental regulations, not just to comply with environmental standards, but to actually go further, to exceed the bare minimum, to find common sense, cost-effective solutions. Our Common Sense Initiative is working industry by industry to develop creative, new, industry-wide strategies for controlling pollution, working with the automobile sector, steel, electronics, printing, oil refining, metal finishing. We've cut red tape for honest business owners. We've eliminated 15 million hours of paperwork for businesses across this country. By the end of this year, we expect to eliminate another 10 million hours of paperwork. Time that will no longer be spent filling out forms, time that will now be available to ensure that the clean air, the water standards are actually being met. We've said to the small businesses of this country, we know this is complicated. We know it is sometimes hard to understand. If you don't understand what is expected of you, if you don't understand the requirements, come forward voluntarily. We'll work with you to solve the problem. If you've made a mistake, if you're willing to fix the problem, to fix the mistake, we can waive the penalty. We'd rather see the money spent to solve the problem, prevent the pollution, protect the environment. But for those intransigent polluters, for those who irresponsibly disregard the law, for those who pollute the public's air, water, and land, you have every right to expect that your government will take swift, effective action. To those in the private sector who do make the investment necessary to meet public health and environmental standards, you have every right to demand that you not find yourself subject to unfair competition from those who don't make the investment, from those who don't meet the standards. And so we have vigorously pursued those who ignore environmental standards, and we have collected the largest environmental fines in the history of the Environmental Protection Agency. At the heart of all that we have done in the last 3.5 years is a fundamental principle. It is a principle that the president, the vice president articulated in their first race. And it is a simple principle. It is that environmental protection and economic progress go hand in hand, that we do not have to choose between our health and our jobs, that in fact, the two are inextricably linked. Today, the unemployment is at its lowest level in 6 years. Inflation is in check. Under the president's leadership, 10 million new jobs, 2 million new businesses, 4.4 million new homeowners. Here in Oregon, 155,000 new jobs. During the same period of time that we have experienced this kind of economic growth and prosperity, toxic pollution from industry has steadily declined. From 1992 to 1994 alone, toxic pollution was down 19%. It is simple. A healthy economy begets a healthier environment, a healthy environment, a stronger economy. Unfortunately, there are still those out there who suggest that we have to choose, that we can't have both. There are those who suggest we should deny the people of this country strong public health and environmental protections. There are those who have suggested, who argue that, hey, the job is done. The air is clean enough, the water's safe, the job's done, we've completed our work, our commitment can waver, we can close up shop. Over the last 2 years, we witnessed an unprecedented assault by the United States Congress on public health and environmental protections. The EPA was shut down, reopened, shut down. Clean Water Act was passed that would have reversed 25 years of environmental progress in this country. In the battle over the EPA budget, over the Clean Water Act, and other environmental laws, President Clinton stood firm for public health and environmental protection. And because of that, today, vital public health and environmental protections are in place and will remain in place. We've made a lot of progress, but the job is not done. Here in your state, more than 50% of the rivers and streams that you have studied are still too polluted for fishing, for swimming. More than 300,000 of your fellow citizens received their drinking water from a water system that violated public health standards in the past year. Clearly, the job is not done. If we are to secure a clean, safe environment, if we are to have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, land free of toxics, we must remain ever vigilant. The legislation, the 2 bills that the President signed last month, is a sign that we can work together, all of us, for a better future. It is a sign that the bipartisan commitment that once existed for a better future can reemerge. It is a sign that we can move forward as a country and give our children, our children's children, a better future. Last week, President Clinton spoke about building a bridge to the 21st century, a bridge to the 21st century with a clean, safe environment. He announced 5 important initiatives to meet the environmental challenges of the 21st century, to protect our communities from toxic pollution through common sense, cost-effective strategies. He committed to further accelerate the pace of Superfund cleanup. He committed to clean up 2/3 of this country's worst toxic waste sites by the year 2000. He committed to expand our work on the smaller sites, the Brownfields sites, the Brownfields Redevelopment Initiative, to create a revolving loan fund so the small businesses who want to revitalize those sites will have access to the dollars, to create a tax incentive to allow those businesses who clean up the sites to take a tax deduction for those cleanup costs. He committed to strengthen our efforts to protect communities from environmental criminals, so that no business can gain an unfair advantage for criminally defying our nation's environmental laws, and so that every community is protected. And he committed to further expand the American people's right to know, to give you more access to information about the quality of the air you breathe, the water you drink, your land, your food. We have already sought to expand this right because we believe, there is no doubt in our minds, that an informed, involved community always makes far better decisions than some distant bureaucracy. We believe that government has a responsibility to give you your right to know what is happening in your community. In all of these ways, this administration is committed to protecting our health, our environment, for generations to come, and to meeting our fundamental promise to the American people for the 21st century. As the President said, it is the promise of fresh air to breathe, clean water to drink, safe food to eat, land that is safe to live on. That is our vision for the 21st century. It is a vision we believe that the people of this country share. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here. Do you mind?
Thank you very much for that speech, and I hate to be the one to bring up that there's an election coming up, but I'm glad you pointed out the challenges that the EPA and you personally have faced, certainly over the last 2 years, if not before, with the EPA being targeted for budget cuts, a real lonely battle that you and your agency carried. But I think you have the potential, at least, that things may be brightening, and to make some sweeping assumptions. If we were to assume that President Clinton will be reelected, and even the possibility of a Democratic House majority, and the evidence that 40 to 50 House Republicans have defected from their party on environmental issues, seems that the opportunity is there for the administration to start 1997 with some bold environmental initiatives. And I wonder if you can speculate on what the top priorities of the administration might be in 1997.
The work that we believe is important to do in the coming 4 years is work that in many ways will build on what we have done in the last 3.5 years. It is increasingly clear that reducing our exposure to toxic chemicals has got to be one of our primary focuses, has got to be at the top of our agenda. When we look at the science, when we look at the emerging health data, we see, unfortunately, far too many health problems that may be associated with environmental exposures. And so the President, in his announcement last week, focused on cleaning up the worst toxic waste sites, getting toxics out of our water supplies, strengthening our food safety laws, all designed to reduce environmental exposures to toxic chemicals. As we look to the next 10 years, I think that the most difficult problems we face in this country are those of water, both water quality and water quantity. And if we do not make some very difficult decisions as a country about how to manage our water resources more sensibly, we will find ourselves with increasing water supply, water quality problems. In my home state of Florida, when I was a young child growing up there, water was something that was, quite frankly, almost viewed as a nuisance. There was too much of it. We needed to drain the state so we could develop the state. Now they face ongoing droughts. They face serious water quality problems in addition to the quantity problems. These are finite resources. These are resources we have a responsibility to manage more sensibly, to manage for the long term, not just the short term. The water issues that we see emerging here in the United States are not dissimilar from water issues we see around the globe. And for many, many countries, it is becoming a crisis situation. The fact that they do not have clean, safe water to drink, they do not have adequate water with which to grow their food. And I think the problem will be one for the world, not just for the United States. We'll go to the against side first.
Sandy Marin, City Club member. When we talk about the quality of water, it's my understanding in some parts of the country and occasionally here, different cities' sewer systems will overflow when it rains, polluting the rivers, the Long Island Sound, different places like that. What is EPA doing about those sewer systems that are controlled by cities?
There's good news and bad news. The good news is we really have made a lot of progress in terms of discharges, either from industry or from city wastewater treatment facilities to our rivers and lakes. That has been, I think, a primary focus for many parts of the country over the last 25 years, and we can see some real benefits. Unfortunately, the bad news is we still have far too many instances in this country where under certain weather conditions, heavy rains, there is not the capacity to treat the water, and you actually have raw sewage being discharged into our rivers and lakes. When the president announced his intention to veto what we call the Dirty Water Act, the rewrite of the Clean Water Act put forward by the congressional leadership. It was on the banks of a river in Washington, D.C., where there is regularly, right in the heart of the nation's capital, raw sewage discharges because of a lack of capacity. We have been working literally on a city-by-city basis across the United States to reduce the number of times these types of events occur, to help cities on a case-by-case basis develop the infrastructure to address these problems. What is complicated about these issues is that in solving sometimes the raw sewage discharge, you then create a polluted runoff problem, a stormwater problem. What we have discovered is that over the last 25 years, all of our focus on the point source discharges and the work we've done to clean those up has led us to discover a problem which was probably there in the beginning but we couldn't see, which is the non-point source or the polluted runoff. And that will be the most difficult problem to solve in terms of water quality. And so as we work to deal with these remaining combined sewer overflows, is what they're called, we want to be sure we're not inadvertently creating an additional problem, an additional amount of pollution into our rivers and lakes. We do provide funding to local communities. We work not just as a technical partner, but also as a financial partner to help address these problems.
Well, welcome to Portland. Thank you so much for coming, because I think Oregon has done a lot of think globally, act locally, from Lower Columbia Estuary to our rapid race to clean up our problems with our raw sewage. I'd like to expand this, though. Recently, I've had friends return from trips to Greece, Turkey, Middle East, the Bulgarian areas where we've had lots of problems there, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. And if we're one planet, and we have all this technology about cleaning up, and we're cleaner, and we're wanting our industry to compete with each other, well, our industry also competes with folks who are outside our borders. How can we assist the world in becoming cleaner and keeping our industry competitive at the same time?
The opportunity for U.S. companies that develop and manufacture environmental technologies is remarkable. There it is one of the fastest growing parts of the world economy, the demand for new technologies, for off-the-shelf technologies to prevent environmental problems, to solve environmental problems, is truly, truly remarkable. Interestingly enough, the United States is not number one in the export of environmental technologies. Japan and Germany actually surpass us. We have been working within this administration, the Department of Commerce and EPA, to make our technology available worldwide, and I think we're starting to see some progress. We've been working at EPA to make sure when a new technology comes online that we can quickly certify it. What the business interests have told us is that when they go to another country, the first thing that country wants to know if it's a new technology is, what does EPA think? And the most important thing to them is to be able to say, EPA's looked at it and they say it will solve this or that problem. So working to make sure that we can expeditiously approve the technology, give them a stamp of approval, and then with the Department of Commerce to create the business opportunities to find the places where the technology is needed. In addition to the technology work we're doing, we also, EPA has programs in a number of countries now, including places like Russia, where we're actually on the ground with our technical people, helping them to design solutions to what are some fairly significant environmental challenges.
Thank you.
Hi, Joe Wallachy, Oregon Environmental Council. I'm a guest here today. Thank you for all your good work on the environment. As usual, you know, people are not perfect, and we have a certain concern that we'd like to express today. Our region has one of the nation's highest concentration of pulp mills. Washington State has 9 pulp mills that use chlorine compounds for bleaching. Oregon has 3, and Montana, Idaho, and Alaska each have 1. Our region faces serious problems associated with dioxin discharges from these mills. We believe that the long-term economic stability of these mills depends upon investment in non-chlorine-based bleaching technologies. Chlorine dioxide substitution is a second-rate technology destined for failure, we believe. We disagree to EPA's decision to choose chlorine dioxide.
We haven't made a decision.
Haven't made a decision.
We're actually,
okay,
just so the public might understand here, we are in an active rulemaking process right now. We have just concluded a very, very extensive public comment period on a range of proposals that we have brought forward, and we do hope to make a decision by the end of the year. Given the fact that we are in this phase of our decision making, it's not appropriate for me, I think you will understand this, to comment on what we might ultimately decide. Every person who took the time to share with us their beliefs, their concerns, their opinions has a right to see those fully evaluated before we make a final decision. So we have not yet made a final decision. As I said, we hope to do that by the end of the year. We have concluded a public comment period, received far more comments than we thought we would receive, and we are in the process of reviewing all of those.
Could you say do you feel, do you support the totally chlorine-free process?
You know, I think I was asleep at the switch here. I just realized it's members-only questions, and while this dialogue is great, I'd be glad to give you a membership brochure.
Already got one. Plan to. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Novick, City Club member. Administrator Browner, I used to work for you. I spent 9 years in the Justice Department as an environmental enforcement lawyer. And when you talk about forming partnerships with businesses and having them come up with creative ways to exceed compliance with the law, I think that sounds like a fine thing, but it reminds me of the worst case I saw at the Justice Department, which was a case involving a company that went to the state of Texas Air Control Board and said that they had come up with a wondrous new way of complying with the law, which the state had recognized they were in fact not in compliance with. And the company, which happened to be a big evil defense contractor called General Dynamics, pulled the wool over the eyes of the Texas Air Control Board and got them to approve an interpretation of a regulation which was really a way of letting them get away with murder. And it took years to unsnarl that. And I think that when you talk about creativity and partnerships, I'm sure you recognize, but I think everybody needs to recognize that businesses know their own stuff better than the regulators do. Regulating agencies are overburdened and understaffed. And if you're going to be giving businesses an opportunity to come up with creative solutions, many of them are wonderful businesses and very honest, and they'll do exactly the right thing, but there are some you have to watch like hawks.
We don't disagree with the need to watch, and in fact, for all of those businesses who want to work with us to find solutions that go beyond existing requirements, this is for those businesses who are willing to do more than what the current requirement sets forth. For all of them, it is not just a question of promising to do it and signing a document. There is the need for verifiable progress that the public can see. There is the need for public participation in the system as it moves forward. It is not merely the promise of a particular company, industry, or facility to do something. It is part of a larger effort. And I certainly agree with you that as we seek to do these things, we have to be vigilant. Unfortunately, there will be those who will seek to or attempt to misuse the system, but I think if you have the appropriate checks and balances, the public disclosure, the verification process, the measurements, many of these companies involved in these efforts with us are doing more monitoring than they've done previously, and that the current rules actually require them to do. You know, one of the things about the system, the environmental regulatory system of the last 25 years, is that it has frequently been not just about saying here's the standard, but also saying here's the process you must follow, A to B to C to D. And the effect of that has been, in many instances, to quash, if you will, creativity. If there is a way to get from A to X in one step, why not encourage that so that you can have greater protection, so you can bring down the cost of achieving those protections? Not without all of the safeguards, not without public participation and public disclosure. Those are absolutely essential to how we do our work on behalf of the American people.
Ms. Browner, Steve Shell, member. I'm not against EPA, at least at this moment.
Maybe we should explain to the radio audience that there are these signs up that have nothing to do with this discussion that we keep referencing.
This is kind of a multiple choice question about global warming. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what you see as the science right now on global warming and how the administration is responding to that. And I would be interested if you would be willing to comment on the difference between the Bush and the Clinton administration on the Rio Treaty, and then specifically kind of how you're responding to this next round of discussions that's underway internationally. And finally, how do we get back? How much
time do you guys have? Global warming, it is just a small issue, something easily taken care of.
Yeah, right.
First of all, I think the most important point to recognize is the science on this issue. You have a body of more than 2,000 internationally recognized scientists who have now looked at the question of global warming and believe it is in fact a threat, it is in fact a reality, and it demands some very significant action on the part of the governments of the world. When you compare this administration to prior administrations, what you see is a willingness on this and a whole series of environmental issues to make some very tough decisions, to take some very bold actions. We have put forward a plan. We put forward a plan almost 3 years ago now in terms of dealing with the problem. We said at that time that we would constantly evaluate our progress towards the goals articulated. What we are finding is that we will have to take another set of actions, that we will have to expand the plan if we are going to achieve the commitments we have made. The work that is now going on in the international arena, and there will, EPA and the Department of State and others are very actively involved. There was a meeting 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago. There'll be another meeting coming up in March, looking on an international, on a global basis in terms of how we can deal with these issues. Each country has individual responsibilities, but we also recognize the need to continue to focus on the issues globally. How those conversations, how those meetings will go, I think it is very, very early. It is really premature to make any predictions. Obviously, one of the most difficult issues has been the question of developing nations and their responsibilities and the impact of certain decisions on those countries, and that will be the source of a great amount of discussion leading up to the March meetings.
Thank you.
I'm just going to answer the last question. Okay. I promised Ms. Browner she could catch a 2 o'clock plane. This will have to be the last question.
Hi, Tom Palmersheim, City Club member. Welcome to Portland. It's really not usually this hazy here. I'd like to preface my comment by saying that I'm independent. Having said that, a number of my Republican friends seem to have difficulty with the concept of free will and also the sanctity of life in a unified conception of reality. They consider the EPA, many of them, the enemy, and it's the embodiment of government regulation, mandatory regulations. My question is, back to the non-source point pollution, what are we doing to encourage personal responsibility, recycling, conservation, versus just the major polluters from the EPA?
I think increasingly we all realize that each of us has an individual responsibility to do our part to protect our environment. The fight in which we found ourselves engaged in with the congressional leadership in Congress over the last 2 years was largely a fight about the role of government. We believe, the President believes, I believe, that there are some things which government must do for its people. One of those things is to protect our air, our water, our land, our food, the health of our children. We must do it in a number of ways. We must use all of the tools available to us. One of those tools is educating people about their individual responsibilities. It does take all of us. But to suggest that somehow or another this job can be done without government, it can be done without the leadership of an agency such as the Environmental Protection Agency, I believe is really to set back the cause of public health and environmental protections. I think that's what in many ways this fight was about. It was about those who suggest the job is done, those who believe we don't have an ongoing responsibility. In point of fact, we do have an ongoing responsibility, government and individuals, to do everything we can to ensure strong public health and environmental protections. We have a number of programs at EPA where we work with local communities, recycling, other types of activities to help educate people and to put in place programs so that individuals can be involved in doing their part. Let me again thank you all for the opportunity to be with you. You have a really remarkable city. My opportunity to visit with some of your fellow citizens this morning was something that I will long remember. The commitment and the vision you have for your city, your willingness to grapple with difficult questions, everything from billboards to land use planning, is a model for the rest of the country, and our best of luck to you, and we look forward to being a partner with you in those efforts. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. As much as we'd like to keep you here, we will wish you a happy liftoff and a good view of our city from the air. We are adjourned.
Thank you very, very much. Thanks for trying to run it so we can make it. Thank you.